Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Gary Matsuoka. We're here at Laguna Hills Nursery in San Ann on a Saturday morning. And today is, we do this once a year, even though we can't sell them, we talk about citrus trees. So the big problem we have in the whole world, there is a disease, a fatal citrus disease. It's called HLB, but that's just short for which is a virus. I think it's a virus. Or is it a bacteria? Okay, I forgot which one it is. It's probably a virus. And it's transmitted by a bug called the Asian citrus psyllid. And because we have so much worldwide travel, they both made it here from Asia. The Asian citrus psyllid first showed up in the Western Hemisphere in Cuba, and then it made its way across the Caribbean to Mexico, and then the west coast of Mexico all the way up into California. Went to Florida too. So this is a really bad situation across the world. Florida used to sell 300 million boxes of oranges a year 20 years ago at their peak, which was perhaps double what California grew. This year's crop in Florida is like 1/10 of that. That's how, so it's messed up a lot of farms throughout Florida. In fact, the largest citrus grower in Florida, the Alico company, who had 50,000 acres of citrus, said they're quitting. They're no longer going to grow citrus. It's not worth the effort. The treatments and everything were just too expensive, and without the return. Plus, of course, last year they had 2 hurricanes, which did not help. That dropped about 40% of the fruit on top of what was lost to the disease. So now this disease, the psyllid's made in California, and they thought not a big deal. The disease isn't here, but unfortunately, what happened was someone brought diseased citrus branches from Hawaii to graft onto trees in Southern California, and that was the problem. So they brought diseased branches and grafted them onto quite a few trees of their friends who lived, the hot spot was Sierra Madre. So they had some friends living there. They wanted a certain citrus, which is totally illegal to do, but it's hard to catch everybody. That if you hide the stuff well in your suitcase, you can bring them in. So they found just 2 diseased trees at first, and they thought, okay, it's not going to be too hard. We'll just take care of all the trees in this neighborhood. But apparently they didn't know that diseased wood was also carried in other areas of Southern California. I guess the person who got the budwood shared it with their friends, and it spread further than the ag department thought. So what they're doing now in all of Southern California, they've located and destroyed about 7,000 trees. And, if you think about it, almost every house has citrus. So there's got to be at least a million citrus trees in people's yards. Fortunately, they haven't found a diseased tree in an orchard yet, but it's only a matter of time. So the California orchards have yet to have this disease officially in their orchards, but they have found disease. So what they're doing is they have traps throughout Southern California and Central California too, that trap the psyllids. And they can actually test the psyllid. These bugs are like that big. I mean, they're tiny, but they can actually test the bug to see if it has this disease in them, if it's carrying it. So it's like a mosquito carrying a disease. And so they're checking that, and they found diseased psyllids in an orchard, but they didn't find any diseased trees. Now, if they really wanted to make sure that they didn't have this disease around, they would do something like Morocco did in the 1960s. I think they did in the 1950s. They had a serious disease in Morocco. So the government just took out every single citrus in the entire country for 10 years. I don't think that'll work in California. I don't think they'll let, people will let the government take every single citrus away from you for 10 years. But that's one way to cure the disease. Just have no trees around for a decade. And they cured the Morocco of that certain disease. But I don't think that's going to happen here. So they're removing trees as they find them. So wherever they find a diseased psyllid, they'll knock on the doors of everyone in that neighborhood and check the leaf. They check leaves of trees, send them to a lab in Sacramento. They said they're checking 10,000 pretty much a day for signs of disease in the leaves. And when they find it, that tree comes out within a week. It's gone. You don't have a choice. There's no compensation. They just remove the tree, burn it, and they burn it, chop it down and burn it. So you're taking a chance if you're growing citrus anywhere. Most of LA County is no longer able to sell citrus. We're not able to sell them because they don't want any citrus within a quarantined area where they're finding the disease to be sold and potentially moved to an uninfected area. So almost all of Orange County is quarantined. Almost all of LA County is quarantined. Parts of Riverside County, parts of San Diego County, and parts of Ventura County. And I think even a part of Santa Barbara County is now under quarantine. So it keeps showing up in different areas. Again, the psyllids are so small they can travel in your car and you can drive them 100 miles. Now, up until a few months ago, Arizona was the only state in the United States that did not have a case of HLB. They found them at Nogales, which is right on the border. They're hoping it doesn't move because, since Arizona is mostly extreme desert, it helps. They said between Nogales and the next citrus orchard is 100 miles of desert. So they're hoping it doesn't move, but, again, they can travel in someone's car or vehicle. So that's not promising for Arizona. I don't think Australia has the disease yet. I don't think. I haven't seen much news out of Australia about that. But terrible disease. They've got University of Florida, University of Texas, University of California working on it. In case nothing works, they've got 2 types of GMO citrus ready. So on one set of citrus trees, they've inserted a spinach gene that makes the plant immune. Spinach doesn't catch HLB. So HLB, what it does to plants is it's really a root disease. It travels down to the roots of the plant and makes it so the plant can't pick up nutrients. So it starves the tree for nutrients, and essentially the whole tree slowly dies because the root system's dying off. And it makes the leaves get real mottled. So the leaves start getting strange patterns on them, fuzzy areas. And they said the main thing that they can tell you is that 2 sides of the leaves don't match. Like when we have a leaf with a common problem like, say, a potassium deficiency, the deficiency shows up as a pattern that's even on both sides of the leaf. And most of the deficiencies show up as a pattern that matches on both sides. HLB, it doesn't match. Now, there's some insects that can cause this pattern too, but you turn the leaf over, you see the bugs, you go, okay, that's a bug problem, not a disease problem, but it's a modeling of the foliage that's not symmetrical on the leaves, and it is a root problem. So University of Texas has created the line of spinach gene citrus. They've already human tested them to see if they're edible. And, it's spinach genes. It's not a fly gene or a fish gene, so it's not that weird. And then the other one that they've just done is they've inserted a bacteria gene. So BT is a common natural disease that is used as a pesticide. Now, so 40 years ago, we had BT for caterpillars, and we still sell that. Well, a while ago in corn, they inserted a BT gene into the nucleus of a cell of corn so that the corn plant makes its own BT. It makes this pesticide that's a disease. It makes its own disease that'll kill off caterpillars that eat it. So that's a GMO corn. Most corn being grown nowadays, which is used for animal food, is got a BT gene, so it's a GMO corn. So they've created citrus with BT in it that kills the psyllids. So it's got its own insecticide. So that's in the wings too. In case nothing works, they've got citrus now with BT in it that'll kill the baby psyllids that try to feed on the tree. The other thing they've done, they've got entire orchards in California and in Florida covered with a very fine mesh to keep the bugs out. It doesn't do a 100% job, but they said so far it keeps them out good enough that they haven't found any diseased trees underneath the mesh. The University of California did that 10 years ago to make sure that they can have disease-free trees forever underneath this mesh. Florida, they have to deal with hurricanes. They said that they get about 10% damage on these orchards covered and the screens when the hurricane comes through, which is not bad. I expect it to be a lot worse than that. Have these screens hanging up and the hurricane comes by. It's like you figure it'd be totally destroyed, but they said it just messes up about 10% of the screening. So they've done that too. California just banned a bunch of pesticides that Florida uses to keep the trees clean. They put these systemics into the trees so that, now it doesn't stop 100%, but what it does is the psyllid takes one bite of this tree, it can transmit the disease in one bite, but that bite will kill the bug because the tree is full of a pesticide that's a systemic that'll kill the bug. California just banned those insecticides, and I don't know what their reasoning for that was, but they'll probably have some emergency use for orchards and for citrus being sold in containers, because we're using two different systemics on all the citrus being sold in Southern California, so that they couldn't, the psyllids couldn't feed on them and they couldn't get transported to a different part of the state. So I don't know. I'll have to look up and see what happened to that ban, if it's being allowed to use as an emergency, because they do that, but they just banned the insecticides that Florida uses to control the bug, which is kind of, that's our government for you. It's not considering all the problems when they ban certain things. So anyway, 7,000 trees out of millions of citrus is not that bad, but I have met about a dozen customers who've told us that they had trees removed in their yard. So it's happening. And we have hundreds of customers, or even thousands of customers, but we've met about a dozen so far that have had citrus trees removed because they were diseased. So if you buy a citrus, that's one chance you've got to take. You can be really unlucky. That happens to you, go out and buy a lottery ticket. So, okay, so regular citrus maintenance. Now, citrus they're from the tropics. They can flower and fruit year-round, but they usually flower in response to certain stresses. So the main stress we have is the winter cold. So after winter is gone, then the trees usually bloom. And here you can see this citrus tree has got essentially 3 generations on it. So these flowers are ready to make their crop, which in 1 year will make fruit that look like, well, and by fall, the fruit will look like this from these flowers, and in winter it turns orange. And then this is happens to be a Valencia orange, which you leave on the tree until right about now, and it sweetens up. The color on citrus is created by the cold weather. So the fact that we have 40 degrees at night in winter, or even colder in the Central Valley, and warm sunny days in winter gives the fruit the color and the flavor. Now, if you are in Brazil or in any of the tropical countries, you go to Hawaii, their citrus don't look like this. They kind of turn a pale yellowish green. So if you buy a citrus in Brazil, it's not orange. It's kind of, it might be a slight tinge of greenish, yellowish orange. And they won't have the same flavor. So they'll be sweet and bland. Whereas citrus in California, you get the real nice, rich. The acidity here is higher. So the trees actually have a stronger, richer flavor than they would in Florida or Brazil or those tropical areas where they just don't pick up the acidity. It's just sweet and mild. So the stuff from Brazil makes good orange juice, but as fresh eating oranges, they look weird and they don't have the stronger flavors that California does. Now this is an off-season fruit, so it didn't color up. So the other stress that trees have is summer drought. And so when summer's over, and if you're not watering enough, you water enough in the fall, they will bloom lightly and make an off-season crop. The problem with this fruit is this fruit from a year ago bloom is ripe now. This from the fall bloom will be ripe in the fall, but you can't tell because it won't be orange. It'll be a lighter green, and that's about it. And it'll taste like the oranges from Brazil. It'll be sweet, but not much acidity in it. So they're all, on any citrus in a big tree, especially, you'll probably find a few off-season fruit. Now, lemons and limes, no problem. They can flower and fruit in the fall. They'll flower in the fall, they'll flower in the spring, and the fruit turns out fine. And these will be, a lot of people like these too next fall. You just don't know, it's just hard to find them on the tree when the off-season crop. So citrus bloom for several months, usually between February and May. Every year it's different. This year was a little late. The trees are just finishing full bloom, but they'll be blooming for another month at least. Now, as far as how we treat citrus, usually we fertilize trees in an orchard from January through June. That goes for most citrus. It's the mandarin side of the family. So the original citrus in the world, the original species were mandarins, and then limes, and pomelo. So pomelo is lime and mandarin and pomelo. Pomelos are those huge things that you can find that are like this. Some are, 10 inches. The biggest one ever grew was about 8 inches in diameter, but they're big. So cross between pomelos and mandarins. So pomelos, citrus are mostly native to Asia, Malaysia area. But pomelos and mandarins, when they crossed them, they got oranges. Or, the plant, the thing called tangelo is a cross. Well, tangerines were pomelo mandarin or orange mandarin crosses that were developed in Tangiers, Africa. So they started calling them tangerines. But mandarin is the main thing in that. So pomelo cross mandarin is orange, and orange cross pomelo is grapefruit. And there's a lot of crosses now between those. Well, kumquats is another species. Now, they're not sure how lemons showed up. So lemons are not native to Asia. They just suddenly appeared. They don't know exactly how that happened. They said most of the lemons that we grow showed up in Italy. When citrus were moved from Asia to Italy, suddenly lemons showed up. So that's the weird one. And then the main commercial lime is Bear's lime. Now, the only lime that's natural in the world is the key lime, which is also known as the Mexican lime, but it's from Asia. Bear's lime suddenly appeared in Persia, and they said, well, I've heard that. What's the genetics of that? That's a weird one. In fact, University of Florida said, well, there's only one commercial lime in the world, it's Bear's lime. We better, find new selections of Bear's lime because there's only one. If something happens to that, we're in big trouble. So the University of Florida about 20 years ago or 10 years ago, when was it? About 10, 15 years ago, they went to a juice factory in Florida and collected as many seeds as they can find in the juice factory. Bear's limes don't make many seeds. It's like they're called seedless, which means less than 5 seeds per fruit. And they said they only found, throughout all the juicing that they were doing at that time, they only found 175 seeds. And when they planted the seeds, they said they did not get a single plant that looked anything like a lime. The genetics of limes are Bear's lime anyway, is just weird. They said they gave up at that point. They said, okay, we're not finding anything that'll be a lime substitute for Bear's lime. Because they said they're getting pomelos and orange, they're just getting everything out of those seeds. So now citrus are interesting in that among citrus, there's a lot of seeds that are polyembryonic. Not all of them, but there's a few, which means if you plant a citrus seed and more than one baby comes out of that seed, then you're probably getting exactly the same genetic identical fruit as the parent was. It's one of the few. Citrus seeds are known for that. Mango seeds are known for that. Not many other seeds among plants are known to be polyembryonic, where the babies resemble the parent exactly. So now the rules in California for nurseries is we cannot grow and sell citrus from seeds. All the citrus have to be from budwood or from wood that the University of California sells to you, because the University of California keeps disease-free citrus in enclosed orchards in several places in California. And if anyone wants to grow a citrus for commercial purposes or for retail use, you've got to buy clean budwood. You can't start a seed up and sell it, because there's a slight chance. Seeds usually don't carry diseases. There's a slight chance that they would. So they're not allowing people to start, they're not allowing us. As a homeowner, you can do anything you want. So, but we have to watch that ourselves. Okay, fertilize January for June for oranges, tangerines, grapefruits, lemons and limes. You fertilize year round because they can bloom and make a good crop year round. So if we fertilize an orange in the fall, you get a lot of these. You'll get a lot of off-season crop. So it doesn't hurt the tree, and you can still eat them, but they're not the main crop on citrus. There are some nasty bugs out there, and I didn't bring the leaves to show you. Here's a sample. So this is on this leaf. The main bug that we notice nowadays is citrus leaf miner. And in this leaf here, there's a little pattern where a bug was inside the leaf eating the tissue within the leaf. So it makes a little trail, and you can see that the edge of the leaf is curled over. That's where it made its little cocoon. So it's a little moth larva that does that. I'll pass this around, but it's not a serious pest in that it doesn't mess up the crop of the tree. Here's some more of these. So citrus leaf miner came to California about 25 years ago. And when it first came here, it was really nasty because it was eating up everything. It was just consuming branches and it was just nasty. Fortunately, we have an organic spray that controls it. So spinosad products that contain spinosad, which is an organic killer for caterpillars, will kill it. The problem we had, so this was the product we had 20 years ago when we were selling citrus here, but we noticed it didn't work unless we added a wetting agent to it. Because the new growth on citrus, which the bug feeds on, just the new leaves, is so waxy that this spray and water, you add it to water and spray it on it, it doesn't stick. So we have to add a wetting agent, which is a soap-like material, to this to make this work. So we found this product which has soap added. Costs more. So this one, this is 2 ounces per gallon, $49 a gallon. Will spray a pretty big tree. This is $38. This is 7 ounces per gallon of water. So this one will make 16 gallons of spray, and this will make 3.5. So this is, if you have a lot of citrus, this is the more economical way to do it. If you only have one tree, that's fine. And the other thing, though, is citrus leaf miner is only in operation from June. Might make it into December, but usually November. And realistically, what's happened in the last 20 years is they found out that, this was a really bad problem 20 years ago. It's not as bad as it was 20 years ago because they said that 9 native bugs now eat it. They found it to be a good bug to eat. So 9 natural predators now eat this bug, which is helping us so it's not as bad as it was. It's not killing branches like it used to, but it can certainly set young plants back. So it only attacks new growth from June to November on young, and mainly on young trees, because most of the older trees don't have much growth in the summer or fall. They do all their growing in the spring, whereas young trees can grow year round. So you can get your foliage messed up for half the year from this bug. So spinosad with some kind of wetting agent is important. The other thing you have to do is control ants. Argentine ants bring all kinds of sucky insects to your tree. They'll move aphids, they'll move the psyllids that carry the disease, they'll move scale, whitefly, mealybugs, mainly because all these sucking bugs excrete sugar water as their excrement. Their poop is sugar, and the ants it's ingrained in them, I guess. I don't know how well they think, but they move sucking insects from the weeds over to your tree to get the best grazing area, which is the new growth on the tree. And these sucking bugs know that the ants are helping them, and the ants prod them a certain way and they poop, and the ants eat it. So the ants know how to get the poop out of these bugs, and it's their food. So it's this odd thing, but we got to keep the ants out of the orchard. Otherwise, you're dealing with sucking bugs the entire year. Last year was really nasty. Now, the best product we have to control ants is not organic. It's this Amdro, and it's a bait. So Amdro is one product. I don't have any, my distributor doesn't do any other ant baits like this. Orange County Farm Supply and Orange will have different brands that they get from different chemical suppliers. And it's nice to mix them up now and then, but what they all are, this is cornmeal and vegetable, which is the ants' favorite food. I mean, if you throw corn chips in your yard, the ants just love that. It's got the carbohydrates, it's got oils, it's got protein. It's just what the ants want. So this is the food for the ants, but it's got a slow working poison in it. So the ants, so in the old days, we just had contact poison. The ants walk over there, they die, but it doesn't kill the colony. And the poison wears off in 2 weeks and the ants are back in full force. What this one does is they can eat it, they can take it back to their colony, they can feed the super colony in the neighborhood, and after 3 days, they all die. So when this product first came out around 2000, I had a fairly new house, and we had the ant trails, that were this wide going across the property and into the house, and it was really nasty. So we put out this product twice that year at a 1/4 acre lot, so we used quite a bit. And no one in my neighborhood saw ants for the next 10 years. We apparently put out enough that we killed the super colony in my neighborhood. And it was amazing. We go, okay, there's no ants around. I mean, once in a while you'd see one ant crawling through your yard that was, just came through, but all my neighbors said, yeah, we haven't seen ants for 10 years. So it works quite well. Now, the problem with any product is after many generations of use, they'll get immune to certain poisons. So you have to switch around. But for just an initial use, this has worked for us quite well. Keep the ants out, and you won't see scale, mealybug, whitefly. Most of those insects, pretty much all of them have natural enemies that will be there if the ants aren't. So the ants are their bodyguards, and they move them around like ranchers would move them around. If you have a real bad case of sucking bugs on your tree, usually we use an oil spray. So this is a mineral oil. It's got the organic label. Minerals aren't, they're not an organic source, but they just evaporate into the atmosphere. They'll create some smog doing that. But they don't stay around on the target plant. What they do is they cover the sucking bug for 20, 30 minutes, and it can't breathe, and it suffocates and dies. And then it evaporates off. You do this during warm, dry weather like today. You don't want to do it when it's too cold because it won't evaporate, or when it's misty or rainy, it won't evaporate. If it doesn't evaporate within the day, the leaves on your tree fall off. And I've done that. Back in the 80s, we had these oils that said don't do it during hot weather. So I waited for the coldest night. I think I did it in January, and I had bugs on my orange tree. And so it's 40 degrees that night, and all the leaves fell off the tree the next day. And I go, well, I thought you put oil on during cool weather. Well, not that cold. You have to do it when it's moderate temperatures. 70, 60, 70, 80 degrees is fine. We don't hesitate to spray this at 95 if the sun is already set. When the sun's out, we try not to spray it if it's anywhere above 90 degrees. So oil stop the evaporation of water out of the leaf for a little while, and that's evaporation of the water keeps the leaves cool. So you don't want to do it when it's the hottest. Yeah, you can spray this on anything. It's colorless. You can't smell much. If anything, it smells a little like salad oil. It's one of the safest pesticides, might be the safest pesticide we have. Now, this isn't organic. One of our customers, though, called up the company. They wanted to know how much of this his dog would have to eat to kill his dog. He had about a 20-pound dog. And the company told him he'd have to eat about 2 pounds of this, which is more than what's in here. And the dirt probably would have killed the dog before this would have. So he said, okay, that's fairly safe, because this is used in parks and playgrounds, because it's safer to have this around your kids playing there than the fire ants that invaded California a number of years ago. Yeah, just sprinkle it around. And if you want to be an organic garden, just sprinkle it in your neighbor's yard, because the ants will find it. They'll find this on the street, in the green belts, on top of the walls. Even if you just poke holes in the container, if it's big enough for the ant to get in there, it'll find it, because it's, to them, it's candy. I mean, it's perfect food. Well, you're supposed to keep, there's not much poison in here, and they don't want you to water for 2 hours after you apply this. So you give the ants 2 hours to pick it up before you irrigate it or anything, because that kind of washes it away. So, of course, we want to keep snails off the trees. Now, any good orchard, proper orchard, what you'll see are these copper bands around the trunk. So snails can't cross copper, apparently. Apparently, the foot of a snail is like a naked muscle. So when they hit metal, they just shorts their muscles out, so they can't cross it. So I don't have it in the shelf right now. We sometimes get copper tape. Now at Orange County Farm Supply a long time ago, they actually had copper bands that you just clip onto the trunk, which were better than the tape. The tape does get less sticky. I guess you can tape the tape onto the trunk so it stays there, but they don't cross metal. So this is an organic snail control. And in case there are a few scales out there now that oils aren't killing well. I don't know if the scales developed, snorkels or something, that the oil doesn't kill them. So we do have some of the, chemical pesticides that are safe to use relatively safe to use on fruit trees.
What's the ingredient?
This is permethrin. So permethrin is one of the chemicals that's used on indoor roach control, indoor ant control, stuff we use in the kitchen. There's, the pyrethrums, which are the man-made modified versions of chrysanthemum sap. The original one was pyrethroid, and that's been used for thousands of years to control insects, and it doesn't work as well as it used to, so they made slight different chemical copies of it: permethrin, resmethrin, tetramethrin. There's a number of different versions of that are still used indoors, because around mammals are relatively safe. So,
what about systemic products for leaf blight?
Off the market.
Oh,
You can thank our governor for that.
that just happened recently.
January 1st, it was illegal. I mean, someone said that some of the local nurseries had a back stock of it. You're not supposed to. I mean, we couldn't buy any more of it after fall started. It was officially not distributed after fall, but some nurseries really stocked up a lot of it. I mean, the egg department told us if we had it on our shelf, we'd get fined, but apparently no one's watching or no one's going around and checking that. So, well, the systemics, it depends what you think, how safe they are. Because see, in a plant, the systemics go up from the roots through the xylem, which is the upflow and the xylems end in the leaves. And the fruit is connected to the backflow, which is a totally different system that goes from the leaves down to the roots. So the fruit, in theory, doesn't pick up any of the systemic because it's on the backflow, it's not on the upflow. I don't know. That's what we're told. So Florida uses a whole bunch of systemics. I mean, to keep their trees alive, they've got, almost every orchard there is using systemics. That's not underneath the screening, to keep the population of psyllids as low as they can. In theory, it doesn't get into the fruit. So.
Sounds like you would be for that.
But all the citrus being sold in California has the systemics in it. They have to do that to make sure that the citrus being sold is not transporting psyllids around the state. So, so any citrus you buy has that chemical in it at the moment. Now, it's gone within several months if you no longer use it, but that's the law right now. If you sell a citrus tree, it's got to have the systemics in it. I mean, generally in like among organic farms and the organic thing, all the organic farms know, and the organic organizations know, you cannot buy organic trees. Just can't, unless you propagate them yourselves. You can't buy organic trees, because any tree shipped between county lines has to be sprayed for bugs. They have to make sure that bugs from the Central Valley aren't getting down here. So all the trees that we get from any other county has to be sprayed before it comes to our county. So we can grow like organic grapes and organic figs, but anything being transported from another county is sprayed. So you cannot find, so they know that in the organic world, that you buy chemically grown trees, and as long as you grow them organically for at least 3 years, then you can consider your orchard organic. So, okay, let's see, any other bugs? I think that's about it on that. Now, training wise, well, let's go. So if you buy a citrus, the only source of citrus trees we ever found, now there's more than that out there, but the only source of citrus we ever found that we actually trusted the trees was a company called Tree Source. They got their start in Villa Park. Once the city moved in, they sold the Villa Park property. It was several acres, 30 acres in Villa Park, for a whole bunch of money. I think they built a school on that. But they moved up to the Central Valley. They own several hundred acres in Central Valley. And they're now the main supplier of citrus in California to the commercial orchards. We bought from them for 20 years because they're the only company we can find citrus. They weren't grown improperly. So everything on the retail market is grown in ground up wood, and that's been going on since the 60s. So Tree Source back in the 60s just grew their citrus trees in the ground. It's called field grown trees. They grew them in the ground, and when you wanted them, they would dig them up. They would save this much root. Most of them had trunks about that thick to that thick. So these trees were like 10 foot tall when they dug them out. They only saved 8 inches of root, wrapped them in burlap, and they sold them to us. And those trees were in perfect soil. They were in kind of clayish, sandy clay soil. There was no problem with those trees. You put them in, they lop the top off, so there's no shock. So this tree might have 10 leaves on it on the trunk. Top was gone, root ball this big, and you just plant those trees in your yard. Within a few weeks, they'd be growing and doing fine. Well, the citrus that are being sold retail-wise, now, when I first went to work for my father, he was buying citrus from the retail suppliers. There's a bunch of them out there: Durling, Laverne, Clausen's, Maddock, Otto, and so there's a whole bunch of them. And they were all told by the University of California, it's not their fault, they're all told by the University of California, you can't grow plants in dirt. You got to grow them in compost because dirt has no nutritional value. It's like, You know, when they told me that face to face, I'm going, I would tell them now, but I was thinking at that time, what planet are you guys from? They told us you can't grow plants in dirt. You got to grow them in compost. So all the retail trees are grown in some form of compost, which, when you think about it, compost is dead, rotten trees. So they sell you citrus and dead, rotten trees. So my first job coming into the business, my dad said, try to keep these trees alive. So my job was to water them so that they wouldn't turn yellow and rot. So what I determined was, when they're growing in compost, you can't water them when they're wet. You got to let that thing get bone dry. But the moment they're bone dry, they're starting to wilt. So you got to water it. So I would have to check them twice a day, 6 days a week at least, and make sure right when they're dry, I'd water them. And I was going, well, how can homeowners do this? It's impossible to keep them alive. And then I bought a house in the 80s, and the first thing I did is I went to an orchard supplier and bought a citrus from there. They grew them in sand. And I put this in the ground at my house, and it grew, and I watered. It was near my lawn, so it was getting water. It grew 3 feet that year and had a crop. I'm going, well, this is weird. Because when my parents had planted citrus in their yard when I was in high school, the stuff from the other companies, they would decline for about 3 years. They would turn yellowish because, they watered them every day or two. And they'd turn yellow and lose branches and just shrink for about 3 years. And then it wouldn't kill them. They would level off. And then after about six years, they would start to come back. And by the 8th or 9th year, they were looking good and growing and making fruit. I thought, boy, citrus take a long time to get established. But when I got a citrus tree from an orchard supplier, crop in 1 year, grew 3 feet, crop in 1 year. I'm going, okay, the stuff we're selling is horrible. And I looked at it, and that's when I determined, that thing's in sand. Our stuff is in ground up wood. So I started buying from Tree Source the field-grown trees in the ground. And for 20 years, that's what we carried, because the stuff from the other companies was so bad. When the psyllids and the disease made it to California, when the psyllids got here, Tree Source changed their operation. They changed from an outdoor operation into a greenhouse operation. So they grew trees in pots that were taller than this. But they only used, and to this day, they only use peat and perlite, which is the same material that our avocado trees are grown in. So for years, I was buying citrus trees from Tree Source in these tall, skinny containers and putting them into 5-gallon and growing them for our customers in our top pot. So we were real happy with that. But as soon as the HLB was found in Sierra Madre, Tree Source told us, sorry, we can't send them to Southern California more. Because of the disease down there, we do not want a chance our trucks bringing anything back, and we don't want a chance you bring anything up to us. So we're not selling at all anymore to Southern California. So at that point, what we did is we took citrus trees grown locally in the bad dirt, and my son figured out the way to quickly remove the soil and fix them. So if you buy a citrus anywhere nowadays, you'll have to fix them. All right, I'll have to move. All right, Buddha.
Just like sleeping, like,
Okay, so we were fixing trees that were coming to us in the bigger pots. And originally I told my son, well, you just take a chopstick and you poke all the dirt off. Well, of course, that takes about 20-30 minutes to do one tree. And we were bringing 100 trees at a time. So we figured out a better method. And And I was gonna yell at him because you hear this banging going on. I'm going, what in the world is he doing? So anyway, what he did is he took the 5-gallon plants out of the bucket and just dropped them on the asphalt, and it kind of just makes it jars the root ball a bit. And he would turn it and drop and turn and drop, turn. After 30 seconds to do that, he'd just hold the trunk and do this, and all the dirt would fall off. And I'm going, okay, that doesn't look too bad. So he did a whole bunch of them and put them in our top pot, fertilized and watered them right away. And they didn't drop any leaves. And we'd put them in a half-day of shade for 2 weeks. So when you damage the root system by jarring the soil around them, it takes 2 weeks for most healthy plants to regain function to the roots. But you don't want to put them in total shade because they need the sunlight to get energy. So we put them in a half-day of shade for 2 weeks, and no problems. We would sell them that way so customers can take them home. Once they're not in ground up wood, you can water them as much as you want. You can't hurt them. They're really strong plants otherwise. So this, my daughter bought these from, I don't know the company, it's not on the label, but I think these were from Four Winds Growers up in the Bay Area. They send stuff by mail. But this is a lot. You can see the wood in here. There's a lot of wood in there. I'm not sure what kind of wood they use. It might be redwood. I mean, 20 years ago, I went to a meeting with Four Winds, and they said they used, for their 5-gallon plants, they were using 75% redwood and 25% sand, or it might have been 80-20 redwood sand, which, among ground up woods, that's better than fir, but still, it still can cause rot. So anyway, pardon?
What kind of tree is that?
This is a pink lemonade. So in citrus, there's a lot of variegation out there, but usually variegated leaves is associated with pink flesh fruit. And in a lot of plants, it's interesting, variegated Hoya vines have pink flowers instead of white flowers. So a lot of variegated plants with variegated leaves are associated with something pink. And we know that the pink grapefruits, occasionally they'll show up with variegated leaves. So it's interesting. Anyway, this one, now this table is not a good subject for pavements. Pavement would knock off the dirt a lot faster. And this is kind of dry too, so the dirt's not coming off. The compost here is not coming off as well as I'd like, but if I do this, get the chopstick in there, break it up a little bit.
Is it moving toward being a root bound?
Not that bad. So we do find, we saw an interesting article saying that among all the containers used to prevent root-bound trees, these work quite well. They've got ribs going down, there's holes at the bottom so the roots can't turn around and go back up. So they're better than other, like there's the fabric pots, which are supposed to air prune roots. I said they still see circling roots in those. They have circular roots with strategic holes to direct the roots out the holes. They said they're still getting circular roots in that. But the real tall pots with the ribs going downwards, they said most of the roots are directed toward the holes at the bottom. So they said that's been making the best root systems for trees of the containers that they've seen and used. This is university research. Not that universities always do it right, because they still won't back down and say that ground up wood is bad for plants. So, the reason for that, if you've taken our soil class, the reason they came up with that wood is better than dirt is because when you grow a plant in the ground or anything, the three things that the roots are looking for, one is moisture retention, two is airflow. They need airflow to the roots. And ground up wood has better airflow to the roots than real dirt does for the first 5 months of use. Of course, ground up wood, as it decays, turns really bad. There's no airflow at all after 8 or 10 months of use. But the nurseries aren't interested in 8 months down the road. They're interested in the 3 months it takes them to grow a tree to get it ready for sale. And ground up wood works better than dirt. But there's a footnote in the research saying that after 8 months, it becomes a lethal medium for the plants. But apparently they didn't tell the nurseries that it's important, that 8 months down the road, this is deadly to the roots. It's like, okay, someone left that part out. So all the nurseries that we found, with few exceptions, use ground up wood as a means to get air into the root system, instead of using something more permanent like sand or rocks or something else. So anyway, if you do this, and then now you can do several things. You can either, like that one doesn't twirl as well as the 5-gallon does, but you can do this. So you vibrate the trunk and all that wood starts flying out of there. Now you certainly don't have to get rid of every single bit, but so that's about 80 to 90% gone now. So that's, and you'll notice that the citrus roots, the one nice thing about them is they're real rigid. So like if I did this with any other plant, the roots would be hanging straight down. It's hard to get the soil around them again. But with citrus, they hold their shape. So if you get a soil like our top pot or even sand, it's easy to get them in between the roots. Now, irrigation on citrus, if you go back 50, 60 years ago, citrus were pretty much irrigated by flood irrigation. So they would have channels running through the orchard, open the floodgates once a week, and you flood the ground. So we'd water them once a week. But by the 80s, most citrus orchards had switched to drip irrigation or micro sprinklers, and they found out fairly quickly that if you watered them every day or every 2 days, the trees did better than if you watered them once a week. But the latest research we've gotten, both from Brazil and from Florida, is that you take the same amount of water and you break it up. So they were watering, a lot of orchards were watering 2 hours every 2 days. 2 hours every 2 days. Now they're watering, instead of that, they're doing 20 minutes 3 times every day. And he said the trees look a lot better. They can see the difference when the trees are getting watered constantly rather than every 2 days. So everybody's going that direction. And there's no disadvantages. So a number of years ago, the University of California, Davis checked an orchard where they had the drip system on them, and one side of the orchard they watered daily, and the other side of the orchard they watered weekly. And they wanted to see, and they pulled the trees out of the ground at the end of the year to see how big the roots were. The trees that were watered daily, they said, had significantly bigger roots than the trees that they watered once a week. And they weren't expecting that. They thought it would be the opposite, but they didn't get that. So now, everything that we were told by water district and all that. None of it's true. You can't make your roots go deeper if you water less frequently. Now, we're not selling these trees. We're not allowed to. I'd get fined if anyone found out. These are going to my daughter's house. But what I do with these is I usually put the date that we did it, just as future reference. Now, you can just put this right in the ground this way. Now, you can put our soil in the ground. It's fine as natural soil in the ground. You can use sand. You can use your natural soil. But in this case, it's easier to get soil that's real fine like ours or like sand around the roots than it is big clods of dirt from your garden. So, and then you water it immediately and fertilize immediately after you do this.
Does this method work well with other trees like mangoes and avocados?
Well, some plants seem to be totally tolerant, like citrus. I don't think we've ever lost a single leaf doing this. And we did thousands of them while we were selling citrus right before we got quarantined here in this area of Orange County. So citrus seemed to be totally fine with it. We kill most gardenias we tried this with. We killed most avocados. The problem is they don't die right away. So like you do this in avocado, and a few weeks later it drops some leaves, and a few weeks after it drops more leaves. And then you just want it, and it's not growing, so you don't want to sell it. And after a couple of years, you finally just give up on it because apparently its roots, so damaging the roots can introduce diseases to the roots. That's one of the problems. And avocados are real sensitive to root diseases, whereas citrus don't seem to be bothered much at all. The avocados are. So once they get a root disease, sometimes it takes years for you to figure out if they're going to make it or not. So avocados, we stopped. We tried it for a year. We go, okay, this is just not worth it. And with gardenias, we found out not worth it. Although, for a homeowner, if you buy a gardenia from another grower and you don't want to see it just die, at our house, 2 out of 3 I changed the dirt on, made it. Not good enough for retail, but in my backyard, at least we saved 2 out of 3 we got from a grower that was not in the right soil. So you do that. Mangoes are easy. They seem to be easy. We've done it with mango trees without losing. I don't think we might have lost 1 out of 10 or something, but those seem to be pretty strong too. So there's a lot of plants like apples and pears. Of course, the compost doesn't seem to bother those. So, and then we fertilize these and then water them right away. Now, if it's in the ground at your house, what you can do is set it next to a trash can, or put several trash cans around to keep it shaded, at least half of it. Or like one of our local orchards, a friend of mine's orchard, they went and bought trees at a discount store instead of from the orchard suppliers, and going, you got to change that dirt. So what they did is they took a couple of our bags and put them on stakes next to the tree like that, and no problems. Now I bare rooted a tree once and didn't put any shade around it because it was May gray, but a week later the sun came out. It was 85 degrees and the tree totally dropped. But when trees drop leaves, they do that to save themselves. If the leaves were hanging there brown, I would have known the tree didn't make it. It was dead, but it dropped all its leaves, and 2 months later, they all grew back. So bare rooting the citrus tree, even if you don't shade it, they'll probably save themselves. Of course, you'll waste time watching them drop their leaves and then regrowing them. But in that case, mine saved itself, but it got set back doing that. So. Okay, any other questions? Now, just so you know, my daughter bought this one and put it in our soil back in November, and she bought this one exactly the same time. And you can see what happens when you get them into better dirt. The foliage color changes immediately. It's something we notice when we're doing, just it doesn't even have to be in soil and get fertilized. It's just like as soon as you get the bad soil off of them, the color changes. It's pretty awesome if you start doing that to plants you buy from other nurseries. I mean, we sell plants in compost too. About half our stock is stock we grow, and the other half is stock we don't grow. There's a lot of plants that'll tolerate the ground up wood around their roots, but we grow a lot of plants that don't tolerate it very well. So, but even on the plants that tolerate it well, you'll notice that as soon as you get that stuff off them, their appearance totally changes. Any other questions on citrus today?
You want to whitewash those like you do stone fruit?
Never seen them burn. I think they might burn if they're unhealthy. I mean, in theory, that 115 degrees we had 3 or 4 years ago should have burnt citrus, but I haven't seen much burning on them. I guess, Riverside, they whitewash the exposed branches. Oh, I didn't mention how to train these trees. Okay. So on citrus and on all fruit trees, they found out that the sunlight only penetrates about maybe max 3 foot of foliage. So if you have a tree that's like 15 foot high and 15 foot wide, you've got about 10 feet in the middle, 8 or 10 from the middle. That's too dark. It can't grow anything. So you're wasting your land. So most of the modern orchards, they're telling them to train your trees this shape and only 5 to 6 foot wide and maybe 8 foot tall, and just plant them closer together so that, it may take 4 trees to make up the same area of one big tree, but you'll get a lot more fruit on trees that are totally productive than you will on one big tree that's the inside's not doing anything. So if you have plenty of land, it's not a big deal. But if you want to maximize your crop, then you keep them smaller and shape them so that the sunlight can get all the way through the tree. And if you have an old tree, like say from the top, what they do in orchards when they have, when they suddenly want to make an old orchard more productive, looking from the top, they don't keep it a round ball, they do this to it. So that's how you trim a big citrus tree, to get the sunlight in there so that more of this tree is productive than a big circular tree. There's more surface area. Yes.
So as a tree grows every year, then when during the, let's say, starts to grow, get a certain width or height, when do you start chopping them off at
Anytime.
a certain time during the year?
I don't know. I've driven through the Central Valley and I see those, they have trucks with saws on them, just driving through the orchard, just trimming them. So they're just hedging them. So, at the top of the tree, there's not much fruit that they're going to pick from there anyway. So they just hedge them down to the height that they want them to be. In fact, what I learned from one of our customers is that her uncle and their family created the hedging trucks that they use throughout the state now. The trucks, they just drive it through the orchard and they hedges the trees. And they made so much money doing that, they founded Mission Viejo. So the Moiso family created the hedging trucks for the orchards in California, and then they bought the land in Rancho Mission Viejo to make Mission Viejo. Anyway, side note. So anyway, do that to your trees. Another interesting point we saw is that the University of Riverside was wondering, well, the north side of trees don't get any sunlight. You know, there's some fruit on some leaves on the north side that don't get any sunlight at all. So they did a taste test on all the fruit on an orange tree, and no one can tell the difference between the fruit on the south side and the fruit on the north side. But then they did a titration test on the juice of the fruit itself and found out the fruit on the north side of the tree was only half the contents of the fruit on the south side of the tree. So they couldn't tell the taste difference at all between the north fruit and the south fruit, but the south fruit had twice the nutrition in it than the ones on the north side. As if, you know, of course, for our own purposes, I don't think we eat fruit to get nutrition. There's not that much more nutrition we need from fruit. We're just eating it for the pleasure. So the fruit on north and south. So fruit, I mean, I've grown some citrus in a lot of shade and didn't notice any difference in taste. So citrus is one fruit tree that I don't mind seeing on the north side of the house because I haven't tasted any difference. Now, in theory, on the south side or more exposure, they should be getting more energy to make more fruit. But I've grown mandarins, I swear, they're hardly getting any light at all and any pure sun at all, and they were doing just fine. So now citrus have the advantage in that most citrus hang on totally ripe for 5 months. Few exceptions to that, but most citrus you get 5 months. So navel oranges, you know, they're a little tart in December. You can still eat them, but you know, February, and they'll hang till June. Orchards, commercial orchards can't sell navels after March because as they over ripen, the skin gets very thin. So if they throw them in a box, they just start breaking open. But on your tree, they'll hold till June with real thin skin, and they'll be fine to eat. They just can't ship them at that point. We do not recommend summer navels. There's something called a summer navel, and there's something called there's several navels that they have for summer sales. And what they did is they found these navels with skin so thick and flesh so firm that they would ship in the summer. So I grew some of those, and I ate one. I'm going, this is horrible. And the growers, the textbooks I have say that they're no good, but they can sell them in the supermarkets, and people might buy some because they're navels and they're available in the summer. But the skins are really thick and the flesh is so firm. It's like it's not juicy at all. It's like, so it's shippable, but that's about it. You can say that's about all you can say about the summer navels. They're shippable, but they're not good. Other thing about navels, or citrus in general, is that the further inland you grow them, the fruit, like on a navel orange, the fruit tends to be shaped like this in Riverside and shaped like this in Costa Mesa. It could be the same exact tree. They're taller in Riverside and squatter in Costa Mesa. The skin is thicker in Riverside. It's thinner in Costa Mesa. So if you try to grow a navel orange in Costa Mesa, it's really hard to peel it. The skin's too thin. This skin is really easy to peel. It's a lot thicker. I asked the guys that when we were buying from Tree Source, I asked the workers what rootstock makes the fruit taste the best. You know, in theory, rootstock is not supposed to influence the top of the tree, but it does. And they said, they told me that trifoliate, which is a dwarf rootstock, oh, I forgot the names of them now. Rubidoux, R166. they told me that those are the rootstock that makes the fruit taste the best. Now, what it also does on these dwarfing roots, these are all dwarfing rootstocks, is it makes the skin thinner on the fruit. So it is harder to peel them, but they do taste better on these rootstocks than they do on a lot of the rootstocks that the growers pretty much use Carrizo for standard trees and C35 for the semi-dwarf trees. Now, in the old days, we used to get true dwarf citrus. They had tags that said true dwarf. Nowadays, the semi-dwarf rootstocks are on C35. University of California says C35 dwarfs them about 5%, which is essentially nothing. So you find a citrus that says C35, you might as well buy the standard. On some of the C35 is not anything you'd want to ever buy a navel orange on. So the handbook I have from University of California says C35 makes navel oranges non-productive. And I had a navel orange at my last house on C35, and yeah, it was making 3 or 4 a year. So we learned the hard way that C35 is not good for navel. It's fine for other things, but still, you might as well get them on standard rootstock, since this doesn't do a whole lot. It doesn't really dwarf them. So that's all the... Now the growers went to this because these are too slow. They wanted to sell their citrus faster. So they get C35, which doesn't make them grow small. So it doesn't dwarf them, so they could sell it faster. When they grew them on this, it took them longer to grow them. So they switched. But that doesn't help homeowners at all. We love these rootstocks. If you ever find one on them, those were the best dwarfing rootstocks and also best for flavor. Okay, any other questions today?
What is rootstock?
Oh, okay. So most citrus are grafted. Now, I'm looking at these, and these are not grafted trees. So most fruit trees that we sell, so all the stone fruit, all the apples, all the pears we sell, the roots are different than the top of the tree. So they grow, let's take an apple. There's a apple tree called M111 that doesn't really grow good fruit, but they use it for rootstock. And then when they grow it, they stick the plants in the ground in the winter and grow them in the spring. And when it comes to June, they cut the top off and they insert a little piece of the apple they want to grow, like a Braeburn apple. They'll put a bud in there, and then that grows and becomes the main part of the tree. The roots of the M111 rootstock are there to make the tree smaller and bear sooner. So if you grow an apple tree on its own roots, it's too vigorous. It'll want to grow 20 by 20 and grow for 5 years before it's, maybe even 5 years before it starts to bear fruit. You put on M111 rootstock, they'll grow about 2/3 of that if you don't prune it, and they'll start bearing fruit the next year. And there are rootstocks like M9 that make them about half normal size, so a little over more than 10 foot. They'll make them, bear at a lower height. The problem with M9 is that the tree can't stand up on its own without a support, so we don't carry M9 rootstock. We like M111 because it dwarfs the tree a bit, makes it more precocious, and it can stand up on its own. So the rootstocks most rootstocks on citrus were chosen for their cold hardiness, because citrus are tropical. So they found rootstock. They found citrus are growing in more temperate climates that have stronger roots that can handle the cold temperatures. Like Florida, they get well below freezing in the winter, and northern half of Florida. Central Valley goes below freezing for many days too. So they didn't want a tropical roots on their trees. They wanted these temperate roots on their trees. Yes.
You were going to show me how to trim.
Well, generally you trim them into a cone, or they call this a spindle shape. This shape here. So that's the ideal form. Although, some citrus orchards are essentially hedges. A lot of them are just hedges where they just have fairly flat sides and a flat top, and they plant them close together and just make a hedge out of them. So that's another option. You just hedge them against your wall, against your fence. So citrus hedge really well. You can grow them into the big ball if you like, but you won't be as productive. Although I don't know if you need 800 oranges. You might, getting on a normal tree 500's enough. So citrus pruning is not that essential, and as long as you still have leaves on that branch when you prune it, it's still productive. If you cut down to a bare part of the stem where there's no leaves left, then you won't get fruit there for the next year. But if you leave some leaves on the branches you're cutting, it'll still flower and fruit the next year. So, and pretty much you can prune any time, although they say do your heaviest pruning in winter. If you're going to cut it back real hard, do in winter, but you can shear them anytime you want. Again, they're used for hedging, so not that big a deal. Let's see. Yes. We do that after class is over. Yes.
Could you put the fertilizers?
Oh, yes. Thank you. So commercially, most orchards just use lawn food in the winter. So ammonium sulfate, which is chemical, is a real popular orchard fertilizer. Ammonium nitrate, calcium nitrate. There's quite a few less expensive chemical sources of nitrogen. So nitrogen is the main thing they need to get the growth started. And then later in the year, they'll switch to a more complete fertilizer. We would rather have our customers just use a good organic fertilizer like that one or this one. Now, just so you know, in Orange County, if you're in the ground, the one thing our soil has that you never need to add is the middle number, the phosphorus. Orange County soils and most of Southern California soils are really high in phosphorus, so you don't have to think too much about that number. You may never have to add that one. The soil never has any nitrogen in it, so the first number is most important. Our soils don't have quite enough potassium either, the last number. So to us, this makes a little more sense than this, because we don't need the middle number, we need a little more of the last number.
What about in container?
These are still good in containers. Yeah. So, it's safer than doing, if you use this one only, then you will come up with other nutrient deficiencies, because this only has one mineral in it, well, two, nitrogen and sulfur. So eventually your tree, there's trees that are made out of 17 minerals, 13 of them you have to apply. So only 2 in here, you have to do the rest. Whereas these are dead plants and animals in these boxes. So all the minerals are there. You don't have to worry about it. But, if you're for an orchard, they're looking at money, so they will do something like this because this is cheaper. And if you're good at knowing what else they need, then you can put it on later in a cheaper form. Now, we use this a lot in containers. It's time release. The thing about containers is the fertilizers wash through really fast. No matter what you put on, they wash through. So when I was growing up, my dad told me you water every day and you fertilize once a month. Well, fertilizing all the plants in nursery once a month takes a lot of work. So we use this, and most nurseries use some kind of time release fertilizer, so we don't have to do it every month. In containers, the organics, you can maybe get 2, well, still want to do it every month, because we used to use organics when I was a kid too. And citrus really don't care about soil quality. At the orchard near Foothill High School, this is the soil from their orchard. It's really bad clay. And their trees, they've been operating that orchard since the 1940s. So, I mean, I have an avocado handbook somewhere that tells you, well, if your soil is too clayish, give up on avocados and grow citrus instead. So citrus can take really nasty soil as long as they're not in compost. So, all right, any other questions today? Okay, thank you.